The old church bell tolled 7:00 a.m. as light rain soaked the empty parking lot behind Milltown Hardware. Jacob Dunn, 63, stood trembling in front of the police cruiser, hands cuffed behind his back. The morning chill had nothing on the cold stare from Officer Trent, who was reading Jacob his rights like it was routine. "Mr. Dunn, you're under arrest for theft and destruction of property." "I didn't do anything," Jacob whispered, barely audible over the rain tapping on his windbreaker. Inside the store, shattered glass and scattered tools lay under the flickering fluorescent lights. A blurry figure from the grainy CCTV footage had been enough for the owner to point the finger, and the police wasted no time. But across the street, behind a cracked diner window, an elderly man with thick glasses and a cane stared hard at the scene. He hadn't spoken a word in 3 years, not since his stroke. Yet as Jacob was pushed into the back of the cruiser, something flickered in the old man's eyes recognition. He had seen something. Something important. Something no one else had. Before we uncover the truth, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to The Kind Story, where every tale is a reminder that kindness and justice still matter. Jacob Dunn had lived in Milltown for nearly 40 years. A retired janitor from the local high school, he was known for fixing people's leaky faucets, changing tires without being asked, and bringing sandwiches to the night shift workers at the old train depot. He didn't own much. A small rented apartment above the flower shop, a second-hand pickup, and a rusted toolbox he carried like an extension of himself. That toolbox was his badge of honor. Every morning, Jacob would walk down Main Street, tip his cap to passerby, and stop in at Milltown Hardware just to chat with Hank, the owner, who once offered Jacob a job he'd politely turned down. "I like helping folks, not clocking in," Jacob would say with a smile. So when Hank's shop got broken into on a rainy night and the camera footage showed a figure with a toolbox, well, folks started whispering. "He's always hanging around the place. He's alone, never married." I always thought there was something off about him. By sunrise, the whispers had grown into suspicion. Hank didn't mean to point fingers, but the pressure was on. The cops picked up Jacob right outside the bakery. He'd just handed a hot coffee to the delivery boy. The cuffs were cold, the looks from bystanders even colder. And Jacob? He said nothing, because when you've spent your whole life doing right, you don't expect to be treated like you've done wrong. But someone else had seen the truth. Across the street from the hardware store sat an old man named Walter Gleason. Once a security guard, now a stroke survivor, bound to his seat by the diner window every morning, watching the world go by in silence. Walter never missed a beat. And 3 nights ago, through the dark, while the rain poured and the town slept, Walter had seen someone else. A tall figure with a limp and no toolbox. Have you ever been wrongly judged by people who didn't even ask for your side of the story? Jacob was booked and held overnight. It was quiet in the cell, cold, the kind of quiet that seeps into your bones. He sat on the hard bench, staring at the floor, wondering how everything had turned so quickly. Not a single person had come to check on him, no one to call, no one to believe him. Hank had visited the station, not to accuse but not to defend either. "I hate this," Hank muttered to Officer Trent. "But the footage, it looks like him, and he's always here." The officer had nodded. "Sometimes people surprise you." Meanwhile, back in town, the gossip grew louder. At the diner, 2 waitresses whispered behind the counter. "I always knew there was something off about him." Yeah, real quiet ones usually got something to hide. But Walter sat at his usual table, eyes sharper than they looked. He wanted to scream, to speak, but his stroke had taken the words. All he had was a notebook in his lap, a worn, yellowed pad, and a pencil he could barely grip. And slowly, shaking, Walter began to write. Can you imagine the pain of being silenced just when the truth most needs to be spoken? 3 days later, Milltown began to forget Jacob. The trial was scheduled, bail denied, too risky, they said, and no one came forward for a man with no family and few friends. But Walter didn't forget. He had scribbled a shaky note. I saw the man, limp, no toolbox, was not Jacob. He tried to get up from his diner seat, but his legs buckled. The waitress Cindy helped him back down, thinking he was confused again, but Walter kept tapping the note. Tap, tap, tap. That night, Cindy found herself cleaning up the counter and saw Walter's note again. This time, she read it. Really read it. She paused. She remembered that a few nights back, she'd seen someone limping across the street when closing up just a shadow, but it hadn't looked like Jacob. Too tall, too quick. Herr gut twisted. She walked the note over to Hank's hardware store the next morning. Hank, she said, you need to see this. Hank read the note. His jaw tightened. You think Walter saw something? Cindy nodded. Walter's sharper than we give him credit for. That was all Hank needed. Guilt tugged at him. He walked straight to the police department, the note in hand. Would you risk being wrong to stand up for someone you might have misjudged? Officer Trent wasn't eager to be corrected, but he listened. Hank, after all, was the victim in this case. They pulled the footage again this time, with help from a local tech-savvy teen who volunteered at the station. There, the teen said, pausing the video. That's not a limp, that's a dragging foot, injury or prosthetic maybe. He zoomed in, and the build's all wrong. Too tall to be Jacob, and no toolbox. A still frame was printed and placed beside a photo of Jacob. Even Trent had to admit it wasn't him. 2 hours later, they found the real suspect trying to pawn stolen tools at a shop 2 towns over. When Jacob was released, he walked out of the police station into a mix of cloudy skies and hesitant apologies. Hank was waiting, hat in hand. I was wrong, Jake, he said softly. I'm sorry, I let fear do the talking. Jacob didn't smile, but he nodded. It happens. Then he asked for one thing. Can we go visit Walter? How often do we overlook the quiet people, the ones who see everything but say little? Walter sat by the window, like he always did, but when Jacob entered, the old man's eyes lit up. Jacob pulled up a chair beside him and said, You saved me, Walt. You saw what no one else did. Walter shook his head gently, almost embarrassed. Jacob reached over and placed a warm hand over his. No need to speak. You already said enough. The next day, a sign went up at the diner window. Reserved for Waltertown watchmen. People laughed, some teared up, and slowly the story spread. Not about a crime, but about how a silent man proved louder than a town's suspicion. Jacob returned to his quiet life. He still carried his toolbox, still fixed leaky pipes, but now people waved a little longer, asked how he was doing, thanked him more. And at the heart of Milltown, by the diner window, Walter watched, the town's quiet hero. If this story touched your heart, please like the video and subscribe to The Kind Story, where every story reminds us of the power of kindness, truth, and second chances. Disclaimer: this story is an original work for The Kind Story, created by human writers with AI assistance for formatting or narration. It reflects real-life inspired emotions and adheres to YouTube's community guidelines and monetization policies. This story is a 100%